This is the first episode of what may be a new podcast. And I just wanted to start off with a topic that I think most people who watch this channel could probably relate to on some level. And so, yeah, we have Jeff here who's going to tell you about himself. So first off, thank you for being here. I was very excited when you volunteered because I just kind of intuitively assumed you would have plenty to say about this topic. And that topic is living a creative life versus living a practical life. And are those two things opposites? Have we weaved them together? Do we know how? Does anyone know how? And so I have some questions, some ideas, some things, but just to get started, I'll give you the floor, Jeff, to just kind of share whatever you would like to share in light of this about yourself.
Cool. Thank you, Brianna. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on. And so for your listeners at home, my name is Jeff Finley. I've been an artist and designer, kind of a creative entrepreneur on the internet since 2004. And I have always been sort of this independently minded person who's going to do it himself, not have a typical job, not do a 9 to 5. I've been a freelancer when I first started out doing graphic design work for bands I was interested in, in sort of the punk rock, emo, hardcore scene. And then I got partnered up with a couple of guys who were running a graphic design agency in 2006, and then joined with them. And we kind of had a similar mentality that we were starting a creative studio, a band really of a bunch of rock star designers. And we kind of pursued our passion doing art and design for the music industry, entertainment, and all that kind of stuff. We got into that, but it was very much a combination of like the running a business. So you're doing a 9 to 5 pretty much to have some sort of consistency, and then also trying to fulfill your sort of personal creative goals in the same process. So I learned a lot through that whole process. I was with them for 9 years and eventually felt this calling to go inward. I was kind of burnt out and depressed, and I wrote a lot about that on my blog. And I had a calling towards my spiritual pursuits and towards metaphysics and the occult, and a completely different path. I was really ready to shed all of my ambitions and all of my material goals and all of that. And I did that, and that was probably 9 years ago. So I followed that path, doing the occasional freelance gig here and there, with running an Etsy shop and kind of doing the bare minimum amount of work to kind of let myself coast on some passive income streams that I'd created so I could follow my personal, spiritual, more meaningful path towards truth, love, and freedom. And then here we are today, which is 2022. And I've been toying with the idea of getting back into putting myself back out there, doing more art and design and getting back into this world, and still struggling with this idea of like the exploitative elements of capitalism. How do I stop from turning myself into a commodity as I'm putting myself online and making myself sort of a spectacle for people to consume? This podcast is something that we are creating together, but people are going to be listening to it along with all of their other podcasts and YouTubers that they listen to, so there's this duality that we experience as a creator. We're going to try to create something, hopefully from our hearts or from our imagination. And by nature of doing that, we want people to see it and experience it in some way. And then how that changes us and how we respond to that. And there's all these pressures. There's market pressures, there's social media, there's peer pressure, there's financial pressure, practical concerns. How do you pay your bills? And when a lot of us artists have this idealistic vision of what we think we're doing. So I think that's a good background on where I've come from, and probably a good way to get started with this podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is just you have a lot of experience with this dichotomy. Like, this isn't a new thing for you. Like you said, you're in the design world for like multiple years, came out of it, left it, like you've kind of done every version of this, it kind of sounds like. So yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Excited to get into this. So I have a lot of ideas and opinions as usual. But I wanted to just start with this idea that I think is important, that has been just bugging me lately, which is this thing about putting the cart before the horse. And I feel like I'll explain what I mean in a second, but I feel like this is like a Western problem. Maybe it's a problem everywhere, but it feels like especially here. And it's, to me, it's been hard for me to understand, like, okay, how do I be productive? Because every time I go in the direction of being productive, organized, professional, practical, being like adulting, as people say, whenever I've tried to go directly towards those things, it's like I feel like I'm putting the cart before the horse. In other words, like I feel like the creativity should be leading, and then I'm sitting there like spinning my wheels and trying to be productive and doing all this busy work just to like check some boxes. And I'm like, but that's not, it's supposed to go the other way around. You're supposed to have like this big vision and this inspiration. And then with that, the productivity comes in to serve that vision, and then it just sort of, I think this is kind of what people talk about when they say like going into flow state. It's like effortless because the inspiration is there. And so you don't need to, it almost is like redundant, like the productivity. It's like I'm being productive. Like I know what steps I'm taking, you know what I mean? So that's one thing that I've noticed is that some people really have no problem with, setting up structures, setting up systems for themselves and just like banging out tasks. And for me, it has always just felt very futile. And I think there could be personal reasons for that, but also just this reason of like, well, what is all of this productivity for?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I wanted to say first about just like, I have this continuous like nagging sense that we're putting the cart before the horse. And I don't know if that's just a leftover survival thing. Like we're just trained to like get things done at all costs and nothing else matters. Or, some would say in like the Jungian, women's Jungian sphere of things, I think they would say it's a patriarchal thing where it's like, because it's creativity is a feminine expression. If that's supposed to be the vision that's leading everything, well, we've gotten rid of that. So now all that's left is the more masculine, the logical, the mind. We're getting things done, So I think I just wanted to like start the conversation there because that is something that I've struggled to reconcile in myself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so let me try to, repeat what I just heard you say, which is like, you've got the sort of left brain, masculine, mind-based productivity, checking off to-do lists, getting stuff done, yielding results at all costs, and then like sort of planning that sort of the mental realm where we plan our tasks and our days and we try to be productive, we get stuff done, and we can spend a lot of time spinning our wheels doing that and not doing any of the creative stuff, not doing any art. And now if you leave all of that out, you kind of left with living this life of without any structure or any sort of discipline. And I think that the person who sort of lacks that sort of left brain mentality is just more free flowing and kind of goes wherever the wind blows and really is being led through with their emotions. And they are either creating when they're on, or they're being uncreative and undisciplined and lazy when they're not. Now, this is all sorts of ways we can view this whole thing, but the way I like to view it is through this sort of masculine and feminine lens, or left brain, right brain lens. And the West is very much largely dominated by that left brain, rational, masculine, patriarchal consciousness, I think. And in a weird way, how does that creativity, how does the art, how does the feminine work with that? And it almost kind of seems like we're in this situation where the patriarchy, the masculine, the mind that aspect of consciousness is sort of like exploiting that creative, that feminine aspect of ourselves. And I have felt this personally, that me as an artist, I'm being exploited by some sort of system that is mining my creativity and sort of whipping me, forcing me to be creative and use my energy to make art and make design and put it out there as a form of media that other people are consuming. And then it just gets lost in this ecosystem of creativity and product and culture that just gets like recycled and sold back to us in some weird, bizarre form. And that, I think, is a weird conundrum with capitalism, which, of course, if capitalism is sort of a manifestation of that patriarchal, how the masculine uses the feminine, how man uses nature to extract resources from it, and then hoard those resources, or then sell it back to the people. So it's like, I'm going to extract the resource, the gold, the oil, and then I'm going to create a barrier up against it, sort of a firewall, or no, what did they call it? Gatekeep it, and then distribute it out to the people in the way that I see fit, rather than allow those resources to be flowing towards all people. Sort of like, there's the apple that's on the tree, and Mother Nature wants us to eat the apple, but then you've got this energy that wants to come in and pick all the apples and put them in a basket, stand in front of the tree and says, here, I've got all your apples. And maybe they've done it in the most optimal way. They've got the best apples. They've actually learned how to combine and genetically modify and engineer all the different species and types of apples and create the perfect one with the right richness, sweetness, tartness, sourness. And then so they sell you that one. And then, of course, they have to profit from it so they can keep the supply moving and moving and moving. And at long loss is like the nature soul, the mother nature, the feminine is just kind of like wondering what just happened. Like they're being used and abused. And I think it's because of an improper relationship between the two hemispheres of the brain, the masculine and the feminine. And so, I mean, that's something I've been struggling with and feeling in myself. As somebody who used to be obsessed with productivity, and I turned my artistic passions from a child into a career, and how that made me feel, after 10, 15 years being a professional artist, living my dream, quote unquote. Why did I feel burned out, jaded, uninspired, didn't want to go to work anymore? So I think there's something to that, our relationship. And I'll say one more thing. There's a book I'm reading called The Divided Mind, how the West was built on left brain like ideals, or something like that. It's an extremely long-winded, it's a really long book. Like, it's kind of dry. I'm listening to it on audio, and it's kind of a slog to get through. But his thesis that he comes away with is that the right brain is supposed to lead, which is what you were getting at, and the left brain is in service to the right. And we've kind of got it flipped, where like the right brain is sort of in service to the left, which is like, okay, how do I use my art so I can make money, pay my bills, and become a worker in this like ecosystem, like a serf or something like that. It's like, hey, I've got an apartment, it's $1,500 rent. Well, I need to slave away at my art in order to make ends meet. And then it kind of kills it. So what's going on there? So anyway,
yeah, that's super fascinating. I mean, that's the book especially I'm definitely gonna check that book out now, because I've been like bumping up against this, and I feel like there's nowhere to go with it, and kind of like my whole putting the cart before the horse thing is like, we have the feminine, which is this vast creative force that's supposed to do all sorts of things, and we're trying to shrink it and fit it inside the masculine, and it's the exact opposite. Like you were saying, it just doesn't work. But like in my experience, it seems like other people don't feel that way. Like, in the workforce and things, everyone feels like it works, or at least they're pretending really well or something. And so I keep, when I keep going into these like work settings, or even myself, just sitting here by myself trying to work, I keep coming up against it, and I'm like, oh, and I just stop. And it's like, I'm starting to just sort of make friends with that. Like, and I'm watching other people do all these productive things, and kind of seems like they're getting somewhere that I'm not, but maybe not in any profound way, like, so yeah, I mean, that's
There's another book out there too on the same topic that might be more accessible. I like to read it. It's by Jill Bolte Taylor. Have you seen her TED Talk called A Stroke of Insight? It's probably one of the most popular TED Talks, where she is like a neuroscientist and she actually suffers a stroke one morning.
See that?
You have seen that one?
Yes.
So I loved that TED Talk, and I listened to it again like years and years later, like pretty recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's getting at this concept that I've been thinking about for a long time and experiencing myself. And so I haven't read her book yet, but I'd like to check it out. And I think it's written a little bit more pop culture, pop science, you know, a little bit easier to read, I imagine. But she's getting at this sort of same idea, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
The two halves need to work together. I think, you know, the feminine, the creative arts, having sort of the masculine, I think it's fair to use those words. I mean, as long as we're not sort of embodying gender or any of these types of man versus woman, you know, we don't have to put it that way, but it's kind of like if you're going to make art, there needs to be an observer to that art, right? That like beauty, nature likes to be observed, likes to be objectified in a way. Like there's a painting and people want to look at it and gaze upon it, and then they're making judgments and they're noticing and appreciating it. So that's, to me, that's like the two halves of the hemisphere, the consciousness, masculine and feminine, appreciating one another. Like one is being objectified, one is doing the objectification and gazing upon it, and there's that dynamic relationship that's happening there. So as long as that energy is having a level of appreciation and sort of respect and love for that, I think it's a good relationship. But if it's coming at it from like, what can I gain from this? How can I extract from this and exploit, and then never give any due credit to it, then I think there's an unhealthy relationship there that needs to be worked on, and it will fuel all sorts of, I think, toxic behaviors down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm leaning toward the idea that it started as a good idea, or maybe like a necessity, like you were saying with the apples. Like, we've got all the best apples, we got them all right here, like we're selling them. That's a great way to not have your society starve to death, you know? So I think it might have come from something like that. But the interesting thing now is I think we're in a time where it's almost like gotten as good as it can get, and now we're starting to see like the decline, almost like everything's so great and we're so comfortable, but we're all like, you know, the Westerners are like committing suicide at higher rates than anyone. It's like, what is going on there? Like something's going wrong. And so
right. There's all this mental illness, and there's so much anxiety, and there's so much, it's like everything is being mined. It's no longer just physical resources, but it's now emotional experiences, and are more moved toward the metaverse and an all digital realm where capitalism will continue to mine people's experiences through gathering data through AI, and then learning what we like and then selling it back to us and providing like a better experience than real life. But that's just sort of like the nature of where this is going to go. I mean, and I think you're right, it has sort of run its course, in my opinion. And we are seeing the decline. I think a lot of people have been talking about the decline of Western civilization and what it means and where we're going to go from here. And, you know, we're experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like that you brought up the exploitation thing, because I have totally lived that, you know, like I'm a writer. I've made a living doing that for, God, almost like 10 years now, just writing for other people. And yeah, I mean, it does feel, you know, it at first, like you said, it has that excitement to it, that peak of excitement where you're like, oh, I'm going to do a creative career. And, you know, I look back on that and just be like, and just think like, wow, I was so naive and so unaware of what it actually takes to be a healthy person, because I thought that was totally going to work out for me. Like, I thought I was just going to write forever and make all this money. And I think there was like a little bit of an illusion that creativity could comfortably fit, or like my creativity could comfortably fit into the system without it being exploitation, which I think now I'm just like, not sure that, not really sure if it's ever gonna be that way, because no matter what, we've still got it backwards. We've still got the creativity trying to serve the mind, and it's, like you said, we have to reverse the whole system. But with people not seeing it that way, so yeah.
Mhm. Well, can I ask you to be specific about your path and like how you've experienced it yourself?
Yeah, so I am a freelance writer. That's kind of what I've done, like practically, to make money for, like I said, pretty much ever since I got out of college. So I did business writing, pretty much business and marketing writing. Sometimes I would get to do more fun stuff like writing about yoga or health or things like that. But yeah, pretty much just pumping out content continuously. And this,
Uh-huh.
the exploitation piece started to come in, and I started to see what was actually happening. And then maybe it's even more important for me to mention that, how do I explain? With Exist Better, I specifically came up against this thing where I realized that the part of me that was doing the creating kind of hated the guts of the rest of me. and but not like all the time, but there was this almost like this sickness in me where I was trying to see like how can I get money, how can I get like all of these things from using my creativity, like how can I just keep using it to get money or safety or notoriety. I don't know what, mostly just like stability and money, I think, is like the core thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was eye-opening to be honest, because I don't know if you know, but I do shadow work and parts work with people. So that's like my main thing. When I have an issue come up, I do parts work on it. And when I did an exercise with this, it was literally this creative part of me that was just like, I hate your guts for turning yourself into a commodity like this. And it was like, I don't respect you. I'm not talking to you. And like, it was this like resentment, but it cleared up kind of easily, because it was like, all you need to do is stop doing this, like stop doing that commodification thing. Not necessarily like don't ever do anything ever again, but just stop trying to make this a product, or like we're gonna take you down is kind of like the mentality that part was in. And I was just like very like naive about it, and I was just like, oh shit, like okay. And so since then, I would like to think that I've hopefully tamped that down a little, or I'm moving out of doing that. But yeah, I mean, fascinating. And
Yeah, I mean, I felt that same thing. I would do, so if you've heard of The Artist Way, are you familiar with Julia Cameron?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So it was last year, around this time, maybe a little bit earlier, but I was trying to get back on the saddle, trying to be an artist again. I was having some inspiration, and so I found the Artist Way book for the first time, and I was like, wow, this is a great resource. And it taught me to do these morning pages, get up every morning and write stream of consciousness and see what it says. And through that process, I was listening to this voice, this creative muse, the creative part of myself as I'm typing, trying to have a dialogue. And it was expressing a very similar sentiment towards me. It was like, I don't want to do your fucking work, like asshole. And it's like pushing back against me. It's like, and it feels like this tired horse that I keep whipping that I'm trying to make run, and it doesn't want to run. And I'm like, I know I'm a talented artist. I know I'm a talented designer. Why does it feel like such a slog when I try to do my work? And you read books like The War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, very popular book for artists on how to establish a daily habit and to overcome resistance. And I was resistant to those books. Well, there's a few times I actually read them with a lot of inspiration. I'm like, that's right, I'm going to get down to it. I'm going to finally start that creative habit this time. And I would get about a week or 2 or 3 weeks into it before that rebellious streak inside me flares up, and I have it's like trying to drag a horse that doesn't want to, or trying to drag a dog that doesn't want to go for a walk. And they're just like digging their heels in, and it doesn't want to play. And I'm like getting mad at it and frustrated. And then then I'll go to the store and get like a Monster energy drink because I'm trying to like charge myself up, and I'll do it. I'll do the work. But I'm like, what happened to the joy? Like, this is not what it feels like to be a creator anymore. And then it's like, oh, I get my joy because I got paid from my client. Yay, they like it. Yay. And there's like a bit of a positive self-esteem boost, that I did a good job. But that's where my self-esteem was coming from, was from how many clients I could get. Do I even have any clients? Well, no, then I must not be very good. Let me kickstart this horse again and get back in the race. And I had already fallen out of the rat race. I mean, I left it on purpose because of this very reason. So yeah, I felt the same thing when I'm dialoguing with that creative voice. And I thought I was kind of crazy, like I just kept feeling this voice in my head that's telling me that I'm lazy, that's telling me that I need to get over it. There's other artists out there that are doing just fine. Why am I struggling?
Mhm.
And then a year went by and I hardly did anything. So when I got the creative surge again this past month, and I'm thinking, oh, is this just like new year, new goals kind of a mentality, or I'm putting like my spirituality, my esoteric stuff and my mental psychological books aside, and I want to like get back into drawing again. And so I've been doing that, and I'm just worried that I'm going to approach that problem again as I'm trying to turn my art into a product to put on pack products and make a store, put them in Etsy. How do I do it? I need to make money, and I can't go get a regular job because that feels even worse somehow.
Right.
Like, okay, if I'm not exploiting my creativity, I'm just going to exploit my labor and my body or my mental space and I don't know, maybe I just have a poor relationship with it due to my own childhood trauma and family ancestral trauma, like coming from sort of a white working class or like Appalachia sort of life, where there's a lot of poverty. And maybe that's just what my mind is used to, and it feels exploited. I think I am getting at something there, that there is exploitation deep down for generations of people that have felt exploited and just stuffed it down. And I'm feeling that kind of bubble up, come alive during my healing work. And I have to confront it, and it's like, it's not just me that I'm healing, it's my lineage, dating all the way back. And yeah, so.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's like, well, what has changed? So our bloodlines were exploited for their labor so that they could get whatever, $1 an hour and survive. And now we're in this like age of luxury where we get to choose how we want to exploit ourselves. It's almost like a Huxley novel or something. It's like kind of hilarious and sad.
Absolutely. Yeah. And see how social media has proliferated, and it became this worldwide thing where, your mom and dad are on social media and everybody has an account, and it's almost like you can't really exist without one very well. And what does social media encourage you to do? Well, it turns yourself into a brand, and you have to do brand management and PR. And it started to really affect me when I started noticing that, like, people that I knew, like when the George Floyd murder happened, and people had to post some sort of PR statement about their beliefs on the topic, and they had to say it because they're running a PR for themselves. They are a product. They're a brand now, and they have to maintain their brand. So there's a disconnect between their physical self and this online version of themselves, which has become their product, and it's out there, and you got to make a statement and make sure that you affirm the right things to say so you don't get canceled. And I just thought this was such a joke. Like, people who didn't say something were being criticized for not saying something. And I'm like, this is how we treat like big brands that we consume, like we expect Coca-Cola to have the right kind of conscious politics, so that we can feel good about pursuing them. And so, and you see like how brands are now like like co-opting all of this like love and light language for unity, equity, togetherness, diversity, all of these great, loving, flowery things as we're all trying to create a better world for ourselves. And it's like, it's weird. It's this weird psychological trick where they're like using all those words, and we're like, yeah, I believe in it, but they're like turning it into products, and it's like splintering humanity into dozens and dozens of different identity groups, so then they can easily be more marketed to. And it's like that splintering of our mind, because it's no longer using our labor for production and for work, but it's using our mind. And the whole like follow your passion mentality that every millennial that I know has been obsessed with, as myself included, follow your passion, do what you love. And you do that, but you're grinding that thing that you love into a pulp for resources. And it's a struggle, because it feels like this is the nature of this reality, which is like struggle for survival. And we just haven't really been in touch with that, because we have so much cushy comforts, and we're so disconnected from where our food comes from, and all of the bad stuff about living in the woods, having to fend for yourself. It's kind of like washed off of our existence, and we just experienced life living in an apartment with having everything delivered to us. And we have all these luxuries, so we kind of feel like life is better than maybe it really is. We don't necessarily have an appreciation for what civilization has allowed us to grow into and experience. Like, we no longer are, we have sanitation, we have the wonders of the Western world. So you can thank all the men who built it, the blue collar workers, and all the labor that was exploited on the backs of slaves. I mean, that obviously sucks, but it's like, this is what has come of it. And this is what we have to work with. We have Western civilization, we have the internet. I can talk to you here through all of the inventions, but I think we feel it on a spiritual level, what's happened. And I think that is why there is this sort of rise of feminism and like this surgence of like desire for, a lot of these principles that are considered like left-wing, anti-capitalist, socialist, communist, because we all are sort of yearning for something. We're feeling that exploitative hit, and it's creating anxiety, and we're trying to come up with solutions for it. And anyway, I think I'm rambling, but
No, that's great. Yeah. And I like that you brought up that everyone is, I mean, I'm like into marketing in a sense, like I'm into branding. I think it's interesting. I think in theory, it's kind of like fun. And you're a designer, so you probably kind of get that angle as well.
oh,
But yeah, I mean, the way it's now politicized, like everyone's on a team, and then the brands are also on teams, and to not see that there's any shadow there, I just think is fascinating. Like to look at that and be like, Coca-Cola supports equality. Like, no, they don't. They never will. Like, don't buy their products. It's not ever going to be, it doesn't matter what the PR statement is. And, so yeah, I think you summed that up pretty well. I won't go off on a tangent about that, because I think it would be pretty predictable.
well, on that note, though, one thing I will say is like, I spent the last 4 or 5 years really diving into the politics and the culture wars and the left and the right. And I never really understood it, but I do now. And I feel like I've got a much greater understanding where things are. And I've had my own growth, my own personal journey through all of that. And there's reasons why I was attracted to certain parts. And there were aspects of myself that needed to be seen, that were being spoken for by these sides. So I would resonate with one side or the other, and because of what I've been through. But here's the thing I noticed too. It's like, even that, like, political beliefs are turning into products, and people become brands. And you've got all of the different talking heads that become their own brand. And now they have to kind of stick to it. They've created a brand for themselves that now they have to maintain. And they can't really change their views, because they are like Jordan Peterson is this, Ben Shapiro is this, CNN is that. And it's like, they have to stick with that brand and then create content. They're in the content treadmill just as much as anybody else, if not more so. They can't get out of it. They can't necessarily have a crisis of their own conscience, thinking, what am I doing here contributing to all of this? I should probably just stop. No, they won't stop. They'll take that idea, write an article about it, and create content out of it. And then it becomes content in the machine being mixed. It's like trends and philosophies and ideas and sentiments like get sucked through this whole system and get turned into aesthetics and get turned into brands and visuals that people resonate with. like spirituality, it's happening to spirituality and like magic and like star seeds and, you know, the ascension and light workers. And it's all becoming like a big playground full of brand and influencers and marketers and stuff that are talking about those ideas. But there's almost like there's no the substance with it has like completely left. You know, people can say the same thing about yoga, you know, becoming a husk of itself. You know, like the truth of yoga is lost in like the marketing of, you know, the latest yoga pants and all of this kind of stuff. People have been talking about there for a long time, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess so that the question that arises then is like, is there a situation, like, is it that, you know, there's a whole group of people who just love to blame everything on capitalism and be like, oh, woe is me, capitalism, you know. And but then there's the people who won't admit to it at all, and they're like, everything's fine, and it's like, whoa, like you're in denial. So I'm just trying to like say, okay, where do we go from here? Like, this is why I always, like, everything I've ever studied has led me back to this idea that there are many things wrong with society. The only thing you can do is stop being a part of it, encourage other people to stop being a part of it, and then we now have a society outside of the problem who is building something new. Or, you know, I mean, we're all still technically in the society, but if you can't take yourself out of it, I feel like you have nothing, you know, like, and I've talked about this in other videos, you know. I pick on protesting a bit because I've done protesting and I've hated every second of it. You know, it's, to me, it's about asking others to change, and, you know, that's not your role in this. You know, you can take, you know, the worst people in the world and say, oh, well, they should change. I'm going to see if I can get them to change. That's a losing strategy, you know, like from my perspective. Not always. I think there's definitely situations where protest is like very empowering and important, but I think if people aren't able to, like, just let's maybe get back on track. If people aren't able to stop exploiting their own creativity for some cash, what else is there? You know, it's like, have we learned anything from, I always wonder, have we learned anything from all of these dystopian novels that we read in college? Because it seems like we kind of haven't taken the lessons from there and really seen how those things are playing out now. And now is the time that we see them and we stop participating. So, I mean, for me, it's all about just, yes, we can try to change the culture. We can try to change the people who exploit. But at the end of the day, how fulfilling is that? You know, to me, the only thing that would be fulfilling is that if I learned how to stop that system internally and like stop that manufacturing line that's going on inside of me, that's how I become free. And then I can explain to other people how to do it. But until that point, you know, I have no business telling anybody else how to do it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, good point. I think that a lot of the work that we can do, at least on our level, or at least where we're at right now, is an internal, and recognizing how everything is like a projection or reflection of our inner state. And you talk about protests, and protests these days, it's like a trendy thing to virtue signal, put on your social media profile, or like attend an event as if it's like the new Coachella. It's like, I'm going to go to this protest movement and kind of wear the gear, and there's a conscious like thing that I align with, like a voice that I'm trying to express, or maybe I relate to the pain that's being expressed here, or maybe I'm really viscerally experiencing it. I'm not just a supporter, but I'm a victim or whatever. And so this sort of yelling and holding signs idea, especially when it becomes a spectacle, for media, and then most people experience the protests through their social media feeds rather than going to it. So it's kind of like, I feel like they're so contrived and they are not even really grassroots anymore. I feel like it's community organizers and kind of professional protest groups that gather public sentiment and then create a protest movement that's kind of dialed into what people are upset about, and they get a chance to vent their frustrations. The system doesn't actually get affected. The system is like so resilient that it'll absorb the negative sentiment that's being expressed. It's like an outlet, like give people an outlet for their anger. Oh, we hear you, but nothing really changes. Instead, we hear you. What we'll do is we'll actually put your message within our company mantra, but nothing actually really changes. It's kind of like the system absorbs that sentiment within itself, and if people feel like their needs are being like catered to and assuaged, until you've experienced it dozens of times by going to different protests and experiencing nothing really changes except for your movement gets hijacked and co-opted, and then the soul of everything gets sucked out of it. And then you're like, yeah, this fucking sucks. But it's kind of like for all the people that have problems with capitalism, it's like, if you think of like the system or capitalism as another part of you, like where is the capitalist within you? And it's like, and I think because of most of the people protesting capitalists are left wing, which is very much sort of this social justice oriented anarchist feminist movement. It's characterized by the feminine principle, and it's kind of fighting back against exploitation and patriarchy. Now, what we've seen is like the society has sort of co-opted that sentiment, and it's like it's become, and sort of like well, okay, I don't really want to go too far into that, other than saying that recognizing your shadow aspect, I think, is really important, and seeing like, how am I exploiting myself? Why do I feel I'm feeling exploited inside, and to be really honest with those feelings, and kind of develop that relationship between your own that inner feminine and that inner masculine. How is that relationship happening? For all the people that are struggling against capitalism, I myself included, have to develop a new relationship with capitalism that is sort of seen from like, well, why would capitalism want to mine me in the first place? And I recently took a shroom trip the other day, or a couple weeks ago, and I had this insight of like technology and sort of the AI that is like extracting all the data and harvesting, and it's doing the same thing. It's that predator type of energy. And I felt like it's actually still the same being as everything else. It's just, it has a deep longing for that feminine. And I had this insight that like, man will never be a woman. He can never have what a woman has. So what he has to do is try to create life through his mind, through his work, through his actions. He can't just be life like a woman can, so to speak, right? Like Mother Nature has like this thing about her that is just there. Man has to study it and understand it and categorize it and learn about it and try to recreate it. And I think this idea of the metaverse, where it's trying to create a digital version of that, is a natural expression of that energy. And it's like, to me, I look at it as that energy just wants to know itself. It wants to know its own creation and to study it and learn it and become conscious of it. And so that helped me actually realize that capitalism doesn't necessarily have to be this threatening, exploitative, scary thing. When you look at it as it just wants to be life. It wants to be the feminine. It can't. It doesn't know how. And I think it wants union. It wants union with the divine. But instead, it's going to blast off, being completely ungrounded, lack of connection with its humanity, lack of connection with the earth. And it's going to blast off into some other realm, completely disconnected. And its baseline existence is anxiety and ungroundedness. And the only way it thinks to solve that is through more software, more data extraction, rather than come back down to its own feminine self and realize the messiness of the reality of what that feminine is carrying, which is often a lot of pain, a lot of gross stuff that consciousness wants no part of. Like, it wants to sanitize everything about it and just kind of leave all the negative feelings out of the equation, and all the harshness that I think, and all the chaos that the feminine realm represents. But she also wants to be seen and loved and cherished. So it's kind of like there needs to be a working relationship between those two energies. And I think we can heal that. If we can heal that within ourselves, it will ripple out and affect other people. So
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a tall order, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Somehow I'm doing it. Finding
Yeah.
my way up.
Yeah. I like that insight too, about like nobody ever really talks about that. Like, what is the impulse of capitalism? Like, what is that mind trying to do? Like, it just, yeah, it is almost like a craving. It kind of wants to be in touch with that creativity. Um, Going off something you said, I thought it was interesting that with the whole protesting and like commodifying creativity, I think it's also worth noting that pain is a commodity, right? Like everyone, like discrimination, inequality, women's rights, indigenous, you know, like all of these different groups, trans people and their rights, not even their rights, but their pain is actually something that the system can profit from, uh, which I think doesn't seem to be like, I don't know if people are catching on to this or maybe people just don't agree possibly, but to me, that's just another way that the system could be fed is with the pain. And then we take that and commodify it and wrap it up and sell it. And now we get views. And there's actually a Black Mirror episode about, I don't know if you remember or if you watched that show, but there's one where the guy, I forget what episode it is, but the guy like threatens to kill himself like live on TV or something because he's trying to like stop this thing that we're now talking about. He's actually trying to stop it. He's like, I'm getting so like worked up. What could I possibly do? I'll just kill myself. Like then I can't be a commodity. And then they take him trying to kill himself, like talking about threatening to kill himself, and they turn it into a commodity. And then they start selling that as a TV show. And that's the end of the episode. You know, it's like basically the machine will not stop until it has taken everything it possibly can from you and turned it into a profit.
Right. And people talk about like the elites and these people that are running the system or something, but I think you could kill off all the elites and the system will find new players to run it because it's like it's a consciousness, it's an energy that's like, and some people could call it the Demiurge or like Satan or the flip side of the creator of God, and it's like the imposter God that's trying to be God without it, you know. So it's like, but it's a mirror of itself, you know. It's like the fallen one that is taken on the role of it, and I think it all kind of can stem from that, but you know, like the Christian Gnostics had a lot to say about that. And but as far as turning pain into a commodity, I mean, it's just like the system's going to do it, and it's going to turn everything into a commodity. It doesn't discriminate. It's kind of neutral in that way. And in fact, the system really wouldn't survive if it didn't have consumers. Like if it didn't have people actively interested in consuming it. I mean, it's the car crash phenomenon, you know, like, and all of a sudden we are attracted to things that can trigger our pain, right? I think that there's a natural system at work that wants it to resolve our pain. So it's going to continue to attract us to situations that trigger that pain for us. So I think one of the benefits of turning things into a commodity is because we can safely look at it and experience it and consume it. But it's like an aspect of ourselves maybe that we've lost touch with or something. So, and now we can know ourselves. I can't count how many times that I've like read a book or watched a TV show and been triggered into like an awakening or had some sort of profound healing or a relational experience of like, oh my gosh, I relate so much. It's something's going on within me that I can process without actually having to involve like another conscious being who's like not going to get it. It's like you can use products, you can use commodities. I can use audiobooks, podcasts, cinema, and sort of look at my reflection, you know, and what am I attracted to within all this stuff. It allows us to look at things through a screen in a way. That's why we can look at death. We can look at the harsh realities of nature. If you look at the top trending shows on Netflix, it's all this sort of like violent stuff, taboo kind of salacious stuff. It's like what we like because we don't really experience it in our sanitized reality so much, you know? So our shadow is going to need an expression. That's why porn is so popular. That's why violence in media is so popular. It's because it's human nature that's like needing an outlet and it's being expressed through media. Like, so it's like, you know, I can be afraid of all of these things, which I have been in the past, and be angry at it, but at the same time, it's an expression of life, of our humanity that artists and individuals work on, like in movies. And even though it's Hollywood and people have a lot to say about Hollywood, you know, spreading their insidious belief system towards the youth or something like that. But at the same time, it's made up of individuals who are artists who feel pain, who've probably been very traumatized, and this is one way they can express it, you know. And then other people who can relate to it get a chance to view it and maybe relate. But I think if they have the consciousness of the ability to see how it is a projection and how to own it and take it back and say, you know what, there's a reason why I sit down for 8 hours a day and watch reality TV all day. It's because there's something within me that I'm getting out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if they continue to consume through the screens and become disembodied, well, their physical reality will suffer. You know, it's like they are neglecting their own selves. They continue to consume. Now, if we can bring it back to ourselves and like learn how that is an aspect of ourselves and can kind of do parts work, like you talked about, and bring it back in alignment with ourselves, then maybe that, you know, we won't be addicted to that product anymore, or addicted to the news feed and all the trauma and suffering in the world, because we have to deal with our own trauma that is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I didn't really anticipate us going in this direction, but it makes perfect sense, you know, like we're talking about this, you know, at the most practical level, this part of us that's like, I want to create, and this other part that's like, no, I need to keep my job. It's like, wait a minute, where does that come from? And then you keep tracing the thread back and it's like, whoa, like there's all this other stuff behind it and all this, yeah, like I guess shadowy stuff. But I think like one interesting thing that I think comes from Jungian thought that has been most, gosh, what do I call it? Like has stumped me the most is that we're actually afraid, many people, at least, maybe not everyone, but we're afraid of the feminine in us or the creative part of us, because it's, when you really tap into it, it can be like terrifying, and it's very like primal sometimes, and because it's been so suppressed, it's the part that is suffering the most. So it's like the craziest, you know, like it's not for no reason that there's all these crazy women in the world, you know, like I was reading the Mad Woman, someone in a group I'm in and recommended it. I don't know what it's called, but it's called like The Mad Woman or something. It's a book about like women suppressing their creative energy and what comes of that. And there's all these different like crazy archetypes that come out of it. And we can like, you know, pick them up from our mothers and be traumatized by them. And it comes out in dreams as this scary woman who's chasing us, you know, all these different things. So I think as far as like, okay, so what is the biggest block to people clearing this up in themselves? You know, we can't stop like the politicians and all these very imbalanced people. We can't control what they're going to do with their lives. So to me, that's kind of a non-interest of mine, you know, like to me, that's just me interacting with my own disempowerment. Like, how am I going to change these guys who are ruining everything for all the, you know, it's just this way for me to like get caught up in my own feminine disempowerment or something like that. So I don't spend time on that. But what I will spend time on is this, like, I'm afraid of that force in myself. So how can I let that lead if I have to hyper control it and make it practical and make it logical and basically, like you were saying, like snuff it out or like turn it into a workhorse to where it's like not even in control, not even really allowed to play its role, which is being in charge is its role, you know. And I think I would suspect that there's probably a lot of not that this is a male female issue, but I would wager that there's a lot of men who are just like, absolutely not. That's made up. You made that up. That's not real. You know, like practicality and the mind is supposed to be in control, period. You're just stupid, you know. So there's no outside acceptance in a lot of circles. So, but again, that's a side issue. I think I'm more interested in the fact that us people, all of us who are more like integrated, I would say, like in touch with the feminine, whether you're male, female, we can even be afraid of it because it's in so much pain. So it's kind of like crazy. It's, you know, it can be driving you to do like risky behaviors or addictive things, or bringing up like suicidality, or all kinds of things can be going on depending on the person. It's obviously going to bring up all your trauma, you know, so there's that. And then just the self-control thing. Like I feel like there's a certain kind of person that almost like, it's like hyper conscientiousness gone wrong or something. Yeah. Like I think it's fear of losing control is really what I think it is. I have this. I think a lot of people I've talked to kind of like hint around at having this. So I think it's like a pattern in people. But if you have that, then how the hell are you gonna live a creative life and let your feminine parts lead and all these nice sounding things if you're terrified? And it brings up like primal fear, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's different for everybody. Like there are different roles for people on the planet. Like if you just think about astrology at the different types of people, like someone who's a Virgo is going to be very practical, as opposed to someone who's like a Gemini or something, or Pisces or something, where they're more airy and spiritual, so to speak, and maybe they'll struggle to be grounded. But there are people on the planet that are very grounded, and maybe they are more in touch with the practical day-to-day, sort of living in 3D reality, because if it wasn't for them, it's kind of like they hold sort of some sort of structure. You know, I think that we all kind of work together in a weird way. So for you, if you are like feeling called to try to heal that relationship with that feminine, I think that's the important thing to do, is listen to that call, like, you know, not have to do it any certain way. Like you're going to have to learn to trust that inner voice. Like just that's kind of like what I feel inspired to do. You know, it's like I've had my feelings screaming at me, you know, for my whole life, and wanting me to tune out distractions and to stop going to work and stop doing all of these things, and wanting to get out of the rat race, because I wanted to go within and kind of turn off all the lights and get quiet and feel what's going on inside my body. And I recently did some study into astrology, north nodes and south nodes, and my south node is in Capricorn and my north node is in Cancer. And what that is characteristic of is basically the south node is what you're leaving behind. North node is where your soul is going for this lifetime. And if you don't believe in past lives or any of that junk, it's kind of like what you are born with, your innate skill sets, and then sort of what you're here to learn and develop. And so I'm born with a lot of Capricorn energy from past lives. I've been very successful materially and have a lot of influence and power, masculine power. And what I'm here to do is like learn to be in touch with my feelings and learn to understand it from like a real truthful level, and learn how to solve problems, not by fixing things, but by letting go and trusting, and having a more feminine approach to living life rather than a control-oriented masculine approach that's like, I need to dial in all the dials and get everything optimized and then be in total control, and then I can live a safe life. It's more like what energizes me and what I find fulfillment is learning to try to like let all that go and trust that life's going to unfold for me naturally, and I don't have to do any of that. And allowing my feelings to be an important voice rather than telling myself that my feelings don't matter, and telling myself to get over it, stop being so lazy. learning to trust my intuition, the pain that I experience, and like instead of trying to fix the pain so I don't feel it anymore, like learning to be with the pain as a witness with like love and compassion and respect, rather than how can I solve you? Because that's, if you think about it, as like men and women in a relationship, you've got one voice, often the woman, that's expressing and venting and explaining her problems, and the man is sitting there trying to think about it and like, okay, well, have you seen, there's a skit called It's Not About the Nail, where a woman has a nail in her forehead and she's sitting there complaining about this pain that's in her forehead and she can't figure it out, and the man's just staring at the nail and he's like, honey, it's right there, all you got to do is pull it out. She's like, no. And then she's just arguing with him. And it's like when he finally says like, oh, that must be really hard, honey. It's like she finally softens and it's like, oh, thank you so much. And then things are resolved. He didn't solve it. He just had to listen, and I hear that a lot in relationships. It's like people just want to be heard and validated. They don't need to be told how the right way to do things. They just need to be heard and validated and seen. Like, I feel like legitimately seen. And the ultimate way to do that is to develop a relationship with God or with your source, like with that divine aspect of yourself. Because if there's one being that can see you with complete unconditional love, it's that energy that's going to witness you and all of your flaws, and it's not going to judge you. It's going to allow you and hold that sort of safe space for you to feel all of those really painful, scary things. You can't really do that if you're sitting there working a 9-to-5 job. You're not going to go into your trauma in the middle of the workday. You kind of need like a safe environment to do that, like legitimately. So,
Yeah.
and to actually believe that work is valuable, like it serves a purpose in humanity that isn't just, how can we get money? How can we build stuff with this? How can we turn it into a product? Like, no, the opposite energy has to be true. Like it's done for its own sake. There's way more to life than this other stuff. And to kind of have the paradigm shift to kind of do that. And that was a paradigm shift for me. I had to go through that. So
yeah, I think like it's like unconditional love, like the cancer thing you were talking about. That's like that motherly, it's okay no matter what you do energy. It's like missing, like it's nowhere. When you go out in the workforce, when you go out in just general society, I think everyone to some extent is looking for somebody to be doing that role. Like, who is just going to be okay with me? And then you, like you said, you like project it onto your partner. Like, you have to be this way for me. Like, somebody's got to do it, like our parents didn't do it. Our parents' parents didn't do it for them. So it's like, yeah, and kind of what you're saying, like, I think nature and animals are the only place that I've ever found that particular energy where it's like,
yeah,
you are okay as you are. Like I can go out in the woods and feel that from, the trees. I can look at my dog and feel that, but I cannot find a person who is able to give me that. So I think,
yeah,
that's kind of, I think, what makes people feel like this whole feminine creative path is valueless. It doesn't have any value. It won't give me money. It won't make me safe. It won't make other people like me. If anything, they'll reject me for being too emotional or something.
yeah.
It's just
to be weak and vulnerable. Like, you're going to get squashed, taken advantage of.
Right. Like, it doesn't check any of the boxes. And so people are just like, really? Like, that's what I gotta spend my time on? And it's like, that's you. That's how you feel about you, Like, if you feel that way, if you're like, oh God, I gotta like get in touch with my feelings, and like, oh, I'm traumatized, and I gotta sit here and pay attention to it. That's your relationship with you. That's, that's kind of what we've been trained into. I don't even know if necessarily like some evil force trained us to be that way. I think maybe just being in survival mode maybe trained us to be that way.
Yeah.
Although I think the culture definitely doesn't help because everything's conditional. It's like if your brand isn't interesting enough, then you don't get enough money, So
Oh yeah, and especially when I wanted to be authentic on social media, because I wasn't about lying or this and that. I used social media back then to try to express myself and to be authentic. And often that's really being authentic about pain, about negative stuff, because social media is often a highlight reel, But then I saw quickly how the negative stuff, when I'm writing about it, it's like, oh, I'm just kind of making a spectacle out of my negative stuff. And then I'm posting out there and I'm getting likes and shares. That just feels wrong. Ugh. It's like I'm turning the inside out for a product. And it's like, well, there goes my blogging. I love blogging. Now I'm not blogging anymore because, I don't know. It's like,
yeah,
it does that. I don't know. And then you can see now it's like a trend. Everyone's talking about trauma. I don't use TikTok, but apparently everyone's talking. It's like trauma is a thing. Everyone's a therapist. Everybody who's been to therapy is now putting that language out into their social media. So people are talking like they're in therapy in casual conversations. They're like giving trigger warnings, right, to like avoid triggering other people in front, and how like mental health therapy, trauma stuff has like made its way into popular culture and in social media, and like the lexicon of just speaking to other people and what people expect. They expect other people to be their therapist or to hold space. All of these like therapy lingo, and I've read it from self-help books, but I've seen how popular it's become. I mean, it's a thing, but that's one reason why it's like I don't use social media, is because I don't like seeing my spiritual stuff that I hold sacred turned into products. Turned into a thing that people are consuming online. Although I've consumed it myself, but
yeah. I actually saw a somatic practitioner on Instagram talking about that, and I was really excited because I was like, I've never seen anyone talk about that anywhere. She was basically saying like, your pain doesn't have to be a spectacle,
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting.
Well, here's the thing too, though. When someone's feeling their pain, like there's a girl that I follow. She's posted videos of herself receiving like a somatic healing, and she's crying. And my girlfriend and I are like, we kind of judge her in a way of like, why is she posting this online? But I'm thinking like, we've both found it super helpful, like, and validating and encouraging of like, it's okay to be like this. So for every like judgment that I have, there's also kind of a silver lining and like something I'm getting out of it that I should be grateful for.
Yeah. And I think it's all about being in touch with, like, as the person who's putting that content out, like, am I being an exploiter of myself or am I not? Totally depends on the person. One person might usually I think you can tell, to be honest, but one person might be doing that, exploiting themselves. Another person might be like, oh, this is like my true path. Like, this is really what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. This is the most inspirational thing I can be doing right now, So yeah, I think it's just about kind of, I think it's underrated, like seeing where your impulse is coming from, instead of just like going and having an urge and then going and doing the thing. It's like, well, where's the impulse coming from?
Yeah, right. It's like, are we just experiencing something we're trying to run away from in our current reality, or we're trying to seek it out elsewhere, and kind of learning what is it that we're really after? And oftentimes it's like safety or something really fundamental. Then if we can learn how to figure out how to feel safe right here, right now, like instead of grasping out there at things that we hope are going to make us feel safe, whether it's in a partner or a job or in money, can I actually feel that here? And what do I need to do? And sometimes it's like learning how to have faith and learning to develop trust, to fall into the arms of like the divine, to surrender that you are loved and you will be safe and things will be provided for you, without you having to frantically panic, right, search for something.
Right.
So
yeah. If I'm being led by my creativity and my feminine impulse, or whatever the hell we want to call it, to me, there's probably going to be this thing where it feels like you're doing things the wrong way, because it's like, if everyone else is putting the cart before the horse and all that matters is the mind and being practical and making money, and if you take all that and you're like, no, that has to serve the other force, the bigger force, it's, in my experience, it's been like everyone sort of looks at you like, why are you doing everything the wrong way? Like, what, like I was thinking about how, like I'm left-handed and everything's designed for like desks and things in school, everything's designed for being right-handed. And I feel like it's like an exact metaphor, because if you're like, if you use your left side, you're like supposedly right-brained. And I feel like it's a good metaphor of like, I've always done things the feminine way, and uh it's always just been kind of weird and clunky and awkward. And so like being left-handed has just been another part of that, where everything has to be weird and clunky and backwards. And I used to know someone who was left-handed, and he explained this to me in such detail. He was talking about doors and how most doors you open are situated for right-handed people. And so you go through your whole life just feeling like you are awkward, like you are misplaced. And I feel like that's like an exact metaphor for being someone who doesn't put the cart before the horse. Like I am starting with the feminine, and then practicality comes after, like logic comes after, money comes after, everything comes after. But as you're doing that, it's like, you know, all this shame could come up. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be like everyone else? You know, other people kind of say like, why do you know, outside negative feedback. So I think that's really what makes this tricky too, is just that you don't, there's no reward, you know, like there's no outside reward for making this switch like we're telling people to do. You know, like you're not going to get applause or anything necessarily. Maybe from like-minded people you will, but you're not necessarily gonna be rich. You're not necessarily like, everything's not necessarily gonna fall into place. So you have to have some deeper reason for doing it, I think, is kind of where I would leave off.
Right. It's like the intrinsic versus the extrinsic motivation. And you can think of it as the feminine and the masculine, maybe, you know, like the one is an inner feeling of satisfaction for its own sake. You recognize it, you feel it, and it's not other people giving you money, likes, or this, but that will come. You know, it's like, it's not like it's a all or nothing or one or the other. And you know, something that I've been attracted to is the teachings of Neville Goddard. Are you familiar with him, or law of attraction stuff?
Law of attraction, yeah. I'm not familiar with him though.
So he's like an old school. Well, he's not alive anymore, but he's somebody that people read his books and his lectures and stuff. And there's a whole subreddit on Reddit about him that I've been, you know, I keep it in mind from time to time. But it's about like disregarding 3D reality as it's merely just an illusion or a reflection of your inner state anyway. And if you want to learn how to like lead with that feminine, I feel like it's a very good resource to kind of like develop things such as surrender, trust, using that imagination, and like learning to flow through life, knowing that things are coming to you in a receiving mode rather than going out and getting. And so it's a flip of the way the world of how we typically see reality, which is, dude, we live in 3D. We have to go work and hustle and make money and survive and pay all the bills and do all these things, right? But this is kind of like, no, you work from the inside out. Like, and so it flips everything on its head. And it's kind of difficult to buy into it because I have judgments about this. It's like, oh, these people are ungrounded. There's no room for negativity there. You don't want to get negative thoughts in your head. But it's kind of like the negative thoughts are there anyway. And how do you relate to them? It's kind of like, well, from what I've seen, it's you get negative feedback in your reality, but you don't pay it any attention or seriousness. You kind of say, okay, but you know in your heart that like what you're doing is correct, or where you're going is correct, because you're surrendered to sort of the natural flow of reality of life. So there isn't anything, you don't care about other people's judgments. You are tapped into something that is more intrinsic to you. So it's like other people can say whatever they want, and we're just like, it's kind of neutral. It depends on how you feel about it. Like if you take their criticism of you personally, and you really own it, it's kind of like, well, there's part of you that judges yourself like that anyway, and that person's judgment just triggered that insecurity within you, which now you have the opportunity to heal and to not react to that, but go and do your like unconditional love work and develop that relationship with all the hurt parts of you. You know, it's giving you more opportunity to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is a great way to kind of like summarize this conversation, is because I think it seems like what people are hoping for is, you know, like we were saying, like, okay, there's no external payoff for making this switch, you know, like, so you're not necessarily going to get this like immediate love and attention and safety and all these things that humans need. But if you are willing to make that switch and like really commit to it, like I'm putting this first, I'm putting what matters first, everything else serves that, and creating like a feedback loop of that instead of it going in reverse where we're exploiting ourselves. I think the question people want to find out is, can I be supported by something higher than society and the way things are?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people haven't experienced that. And so they're kind of wondering, like, is it possible? Like they're trying to dip a toe in, but it's almost like you can't do that. You need to jump in. It's like people always say, like, jump in, the net will appear.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think people are like kind of like, okay, like law of attraction, yeah, like all this stuff, like, but will it work? You know, like, can I actually do this? And
Right, they want certainty that it's going to work.
yeah, like, am I going to be homeless if I try this? And yeah, I think it's something you have to jump into. I mean, for me, I sort of live with it in like a weird way. Like I have a lot of number sequences bombarding me like every single day.
Oh yeah.
And I have for years now. I've had this whole saga, this ongoing saga with like number sequences. Like right now it's fours. Like fours are always just like everywhere. And I'm like, what does four stand for? Like, what is four? You know, I'm like looking it up, and then it'll switch to like two. And then for like a month straight, it'll just be twos everywhere. I'm like, what is two? What is two? You know, and it's like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And I think it's so peculiar how I just live with that all the time. And like a lot of people have experience with that sort of thing, but it's like for the rest of us, people are like starved of that. Like they don't have any sort of association with anything remotely magical or synchronistic, or, you know, any sense that they are being helped or guided in any way by anything more powerful than themselves. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, all I can say is I invite people to just jump in and find out, because that's the only thing you can really do, is just see, like, can I be supported? Can I be guided? Can I be, you know, if I take myself out of exploitation, is there going to be any net to catch me, or is it just nothing? You know?
Yeah.
I think people are terrified to do that. I think that's what it comes down to. And like you said, everything's just a reflection of you. You know, like if your nervous system's freaked out, you're going to look out in the world, you're going to see all these freaked out things. You know, if you feel tons of bliss, you're going to look out at the world. Whatever environment you're in, you're going to see a bunch of things that reflect bliss. It's all just, you know. So
Yeah.
I think if people could fully commit to that, they would see like a radical shift. It's just a matter of getting over, you know, the fear of doing it. And I speak for myself as well.
Yeah. No, that was brilliantly put. I think, you know, you really expressed it well there. And I think you're right on the money, because you know, who can I trust, like more than myself or more than fallible humans? And it's like, you know, I've had this relationship or this voice or this inner being part of myself since I was a kid, that it's like it's always sort of been there. And there's been times in my life where I felt like I've consciously walked away from it and pursued something, and then now I've consciously chose to come back, and that's who I dialogue with at the end of the night. And it's like, do you feel supported by something larger than life or larger than this society or the people in it? You know, and the only way to really do that is to work with that energy and learn how to develop a relationship with it. Like, take little baby steps to develop that trust. And that's the thing, you can't actually learn how to trust unless there's a situation that requires it, which is usually a risk. So if you didn't have any risk or there was no uncertainty, then you can't actually trust anything, because you've erased all of it by doing all your due diligence to erase any sort of uncertainty. But you can just shortcut it just by leaning into uncertainty and being like, okay, if I die, I die, you know, or something like that, and learning to go right to your fear. And maybe you can experience it in the safety of your own room, where you literally are safe, and you can actually just imagine going there and then surrendering into whatever that fear is. Maybe I will be homeless, and then accepting that, okay, fine, I'll be homeless, you know, and then sort of like letting yourself be caught in that, whatever it is that you are. Hopefully, it's you know, your higher self or your benevolent self or your soul or God or something. But yeah, it's a relationship that you got to develop. It's not, and it's like you can't approach it in a way that's mechanical. Will this work? You know,
Yeah.
it's weird, because if
Yeah.
you're like, will this work? It's like, it's a different energy. Like, you don't go to your partner in relationship with that energy, do you? Or you don't treat your children that way, or it's a relationship. There's a different way you engage, and it's not calculated. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's like, will this work? Is like, what do you mean work? What do you need it to do for you? You know,
Exactly.
that's
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Will this work? Meaning, okay, will I get the apartment that I want? Will I get the car? Because that's what I'm learning. I'm kind of, my girlfriend, we're thinking about that right now. Like, we're thinking about where we're going to live next. And there's like, okay, we go on these sites like Craigslist or, you know, apartment, whatever, and everything looks miserable and hopeless, and we feel deflated. And I'm like, these things, the housing market sucks. And then I'm like attracted to material that's reflecting that belief back to me, how much the housing market sucks and no one can afford anything. And I'm starting to feel like, you know, that's a part of me that I feel like I would have related to a while ago, but I kind of feel like I am supported by something bigger than me. So what is this reflecting back to me now? You know, this feeling of scarcity, of fear, of anxiety. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have to get into that. I think you said it eloquently and wrapped it up greatly with your last statement.
Yeah, I think I think everything you talked about is like super tied into this as well. So thank you for sharing, and thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brianna. Appreciate it.